Good morning. Yeah, Daniel Fellows here from all seven of us. The other day I made a video on all the collections of uncollected short stories that I have, like individual short stories that of his appear in books. But I thought today I'd talk about some of the Stephen King biographies, bibliographies, critical review books that I have, and over the years I've collected quite a few, I think. So I'll just start off with one of the first ones I ever bought. One's called The Stephen King Companion by George Bean. That was one of the very first ones I bought back in the early 90s, I think. And this has got a great deal of information about, especially his early career, newspaper clippings and stuff like that. Reviews, histories, biographies, and it's not exactly written by George Bean, but he edited it, so he just basically brought this information together, and these collected from different sources. Next book, this is a bit of a trivia book. So this is the second Stephen King quiz book by Stephen Spignesi. I know Stephen Spignesi has written a few books about Stephen King as well, so I still got to find the first one. And one of the early ones as well, you got the Life and Fiction of the Master of the Macabre by Stephen King, by The Art of Darkness by Douglas E. Winter. Now, this is one of his earlier books as well, but as far as I know, he's only written, Douglas E. Winter, who's an author as well, has only written a handful of books. So this is one of them. So maybe 2-3 books. I know he edited a book of short stories years ago. I think it was called The Millennium, with Clive Barker in it. I'll talk about these two briefly. These, out of the entire list I've got, these are the only two straight out biographies I have of Stephen King. So I received this one first in the early 90s. This might have been the very first book in the collection that I've got, called The Stephen King Story by George Bean. Very, very good. If you want to learn more about his early life, his childhood and stuff like that, then this is the one to get. It's very, very good. And then the other biography is Haunted Heart, The Life and Times of Stephen King by Lisa Rogak. And obviously this is a later book, so it covers covers his accident into the 2000s, and so this, if you want to get more of a detail of his life, then this is a good one to get as well. Then we've got a book of about his films. Now this is an old book as well. It only goes as far as late 90s, I think. He's got It, Salem's Lot, Sometimes I Come Back, The Golden Years. So it was published in, I'm pretty sure it was late 90s, mid 90s, published in 1994. So I'm not too sure if they've done an updated version of this by Anne Lloyd, but a lot of fun trivia in that book. So I've got a few of these books by Michael Collins, who's I think he knows Stephen King personally, but he writes a lot of critiques and stuff like that, and analyzes a lot of his fiction and his career as well. So you got the many facets of Stephen King. You got the shorter works of Stephen King. Now all these by Michael Collins were done in pretty much in the 80s or early 90s. This one is an early one as well. The shorter works of Stephen King. And then you've got this one here called The Stephen King Phenomenon, which I haven't read this one or read it yet, or this one, but I'll flip through the shorter works, but I've yet to read this one. And I love this book. If you're a bit of a Stephen King collector and you want to find all different types of Stephen King hard to get, or different versions, or just want to know some of the books that he never ever published, you can get these two. So this is the main book. It's called Stephen King Uncollected, Unpublished. So short stories and other articles and all sorts that he never ever has collected anywhere else, and unpublished short stories, novels, and so on and so forth. Very, very good. And then he did an addendum or an update, 2014 update. But this is both of these by Rocky Wood. Unfortunately, he died a number of years ago from cancer, I think. He was an Australian author, and yeah, very, very good. Michael R. Collins did Stephen King is Richard Bachman. Now, this was obviously an early book as well from the 1980s. This is, I think, an updated version of the original title, which I think was Stephen King as Richard Bachman, or there's a different title of it around. So there's this one. I read most of that one. I'll get that. And then there's The Science of Stephen King. I've yet to read this one, but that is From Carry to Sell, the terrifying truth behind the horror masters fiction. So that'll be quite interesting once I get around to that one. And then another Stephen Spignesi book called Stephen King, American Master, a creepy corpus of facts about Stephen King and his career. So that would almost go hand in hand with his quiz book that he wrote earlier on in his career. And I have read this one. I know there's an audiobook version of this as well on Audible. And yeah, some very, very interesting facts about that. Another George Bean book. So this is the third one I have of his, called Stephen King from A to Z, or A to Z, an encyclopedia of his life and work. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in here, and I just stumbled upon this by accident at a secondhand bookshop, and I flipped through it. It's not one of those books where you read cover to cover, but so if you want to read entries by, on the Glass Floor, which was his first first professionally published short story or anything like that. And then you got Bare Bones, which is a collection of short stories, not short stories, collection of interviews done over a period of time. And this is sort of a hard book to find. I managed to stumble upon this one in Tasmania. I live in Perth, and we went on holidays one time, and every time I go to a bookstore, I'm always asking about, is there a Stephen King biography, bibliography, or anything like that, and luckily they had that one. And another Michael R. Collins one, it's called Horror Plumed, or Horror Plumbed. It's from I think you got that from either an old short story or a poem, something from, I don't know, Edgar Allan Poe or someone, I can't remember. And if you want to know individual details about books, short stories, and publication histories, then this is an interesting book to have. So, for example, you've got Roadwork by Richard Bachman, 1981, and then it's got like reprints and adaptations of the histories and different comments about the book. So if you want to know certain facts and publication histories, and this is a very, very good book to get. And the very last one I've got, this is the most recent book I've received and published, is Stephen King, a complete exploration of his work, life, and influences. So this was published, I think, last year, from memory, and so in 2022, and it's got lots of stuff about different movies and his books, his career. It's got personal photos and stuff about after his accident. I think that's Tan, was it Amy Tan? Yes, it is, from 2002. So lots of photos and stuff from Stephen King's personal library as well. So yeah, so this is just a small collection of the books I have about or on Stephen King, and hopefully over the years it will just grow. There's a few more that I want to get. The Shape Under the Sheet, and so various other books that I know are out there, but you have to get them from a specialty publisher. But a lot of these are still available on various websites. But yeah, look, I'll do more of these videos on either Stephen King or Dan Koontz. There's a few other authors I'm into. So yeah, please like and subscribe, and check the description. I think it's down there for some links. All right, thanks. Bye.